Hello, everyone. As I laid out a brief background on Monday's class, this week we'll be talking about colonialism and how its impact on the nation formation and, in particularly, democracy in those society. Here we will be looking at the case of Mexico and Nigeria. We will begin with Mexico and then in a separate video we will also deal with Mexico. So, as I will reiterate the same point which I um, spoke to you in the class on Monday, in case people have not forgot, in case people have not taken notes, or in case it refreshes the memory. So let's go. As I said, before we go into colonialism, let's begin with imperialism. So imperialism is a system in which a state extends its power to directly control territory, resources, and people beyond its border. Such control can be through military actions, like mm, having a military base or threatening to invade, or just like making them pay certain types of taxes. A classic example would be, as I mentioned in the class, Roman Empire. So it had territories spread across Europe and even parts of Asia, where it not exactly had a direct control, but still people were owing their allegiance to Roman Empire by paying taxes and occasionally Roman army uh, being stationed in their territory. So that's the example of imperialism. A part of imperialism is colonialism. So what's colonialism? Colonialism is an imperialistic system, but how it differs from imperialism is, in colonialism you have a power physically occupying a military territory using military force, business, or settlers. Uh, they help. The idea is to consolidate the empire. A classic case will be the case of U.S. as a colony. When the Britishers came in, they had military forces here, they had businesses here, they had settlers in those original 13 colonies. So that is one of the example of colonialism. So that's how like you differentiate between imperialism and colonialism. And for this purpose of this class, as I mentioned, both these concepts are heavy in itself, in the sense the entire semester can go on talking about the imperialism and colonialism, with the vast amount of literature historians have written about these concepts and also the country cases. And but here, for our purpose, for this class purpose, we would be looking at the colonialism and how it had its influence over Mexico and Nigeria. So at this point, I want you to stop here and go and watch the Monty Python video which I have uploaded for this week. The video is from the film Life of Brian, which takes place exactly, I mean, around the same as the life of Christ. Around 30, it starts kind of slow, but around um, 30 seconds or a minute or so, you will see a group of Jews in Palestine expressing their attitude towards Roman Empire, and saying what has Rome ever done for us, which is kind of a very famous statement. So I want you to guys to go and see that video and come back. Um, so I'm thinking you guys have watched that video and now you're back. Okay, assuming that you have watched that video, let's talk about the readings of Bora. Um, one key takeaway is that yeah, colonialism has its impact. We will be mostly concentrating on the negative impact of colonialism. That doesn't mean that we are not aware of the positive impact of colonialism, but largely for this class purpose, we are going to see how the colonialist impacted the societies and the way a particular society has charted its course, which would have otherwise would have taken a different route if not for colonialism. So that's the point we will be concentrating here on, how the colonialism had impacted these two societies, here Mexico and Nigeria, in taking a particular path which would have otherwise had a different effect. So the Bora's reading is actually a conference proceedings, which might be applicable to all the impact of all the colonial powers have on their colonial societies. But here we would be dealing with important changes which the Spain as a colonial master brought upon the Mexican society. So we will start with, as I mentioned, I think Monday I briefly mentioned about it in the class, but I'll go over this again here just to kind of give a brief background. The first change which the Spanish brought about is the change in administration. The concept of a European concept of efficiency, the timeliness, it's not just the efficiency but also some kind of order in the society which was not aware or existed in the before the arrival of Spanish in the Mexican context. So they brought those European values of efficiency, orderliness, in the way things are conducted, in the way things are done. And the other important thing is the concept of private property. Yeah, before the arrival of Spanish uh, uh, power, the Mexicans or society had this concept of land being owned by monarch or the king. But what this Spanish brought with them is the idea of owning the property, the concept of transferring the property. That I own this land, or the the concept of owning a land, and even not only just owning, but also something which can be transferred, to like transfer of title, transfer of deed. So that is something which was alien to the local population, and the classic case again is the case of North America, where the natives didn't have this concept of property, and once the colonial masters came in, they started dealing with the natives and the concept of property, and that's how the whole nation of United States came into being. Actually, where the native population did not were not aware of the concept of property, and then the land was bought and or sold, whichever way you want to look at it, and then that's how the nation of America came into being. So this actually the same thing happened in the case of Mexico too. So they brought in the concept of property. The second point is the innovation. They brought in the way of conducting things like new technology, be it weapons, like the kind of weapons to use and the tools they are using, the new way of using technology, new tools were introduced, agriculture, like systemic cultivation of land, and then the European concept of architecture. So you have plaza, piazza, and central square. So the architecture also they brought in. The idea is like every big town or big place will have a central place, central square where people can do business, come together and do business. But it's also like you do it in front of you. So if you see any central square, it is located in the office buildings or the administrative buildings. It's close to that. So the idea is that people can do business in that central square, but also that if they voice or if they have any issues, if they can all come together and raise it in the center square, and it is easier for them to control. You can just take out the bow and shoot them if it goes out of control or if they don't listen. So that's the idea of like the central square, which in a way worked as a business center, but also it's for them to easier to control. So that's the innovation aspect which they brought in the form of technology, in the form of way the agriculture is conducted, and in the form of architecture. The third important thing which the Spanish brought in is the language and culture. So what's the language which is being spoken in Mexico? Obviously, it's Spanish. So you could see that the Spanish brought with them their language and the religion which they follow now is yes Christianity, and that to Catholicism. Within the Christianity, the Catholicism strand of Christianity. So they brought with him and with them this language and culture which obliterated the local aboriginal beliefs and firmly established. And you can see that even today that you have Spanish language being spoken, and Christianity has been firmly entrenched in the Mexican society. So these are the three important changes which Spanish have brought with them into the Mexican society, which we which had an impact, and we could see those impact some of the aspects of this even to this day. So, uh, having said that, let's now go into some of the colonial legacies, imprints on the politics today, in the sense how those colonial legacies um, has its imprints on the politics of Mexico today. So let's start talking about that.